What's up, what's up, what's up, everybody? Big Chonis in the house. Monday, March 16th, 2020. We continue to roll on in this epic adventure. Bitcoin, the Dow, the NASDAQ, S&P, global equities, treasuries, bonds, gold, ETFs, everything is in play. And people keep flight to safety. They find a bid, they sell their asset, they convert to cash, and they hunker down. And that seems to be the name of the day. My name is Big Chonis. Please hit that thumbs up button and hit that follow button if you enjoy my content. What's up, Jay Constant? Jeanette, hello, old friend. Cornholio, SS Swartz, 88, hello there. Handy Rams, William Moodishar Hussein, Robert Long. What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining me. Hope you guys are safe, hunkered down, doing okay. Let's talk about some Bitcoin, guys. Remember to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Big Chonis. I did want to talk about a couple tweets I put out in the last day or so. Horizontals and supports, resistances, we have clear lines of resistance, and we have support levels that haven't been touched in years. So which one of these are more in play, the resistance taps or the taps to potentially test lower supports that have not been touched since 17 and 18? 3,000, maybe lower? These are definite possibilities. We have broken this logarithmic line of support. How many times, how many charts have we been seeing people post this up that no worries, all is well, Bitcoin still holding its logarithmic regression line over the years there. We wrote it up here, we accelerated, we found support on it, we wrote it up here basically all of 16, we blasted through it, we came back, we found support on it, we found support on it, and now we basically crashed right through it. Now it's basically a resistance level. What was support is now resistance. And lastly here, do you believe in triple bottoms? Triple bottoms? I mean, how many times do we have to test a level as support, and how many times do we expect Bitcoin to bounce off it? This is clearly the bouncing ball getting lower and lower, and there's nothing that really says this is the true area that we will find that support. Bitcoin currently is trading below $5,000. Now, we have our bounce so far a hair under $4,000. We bounced as high as almost 6K. Just like a hair under it, actually. And so, yes, we are definitely in a range here of below 6K, let's call it, and where's my stamp? And you know, above 5K, and there definitely is you know, an area of play, of consolidation here. We do want to see some sort of consolidation after a massive dump like this. This dump did reset a lot of our oscillators and stuff, but the sheer force of this has pushed Bitcoin significantly lower than what we normally would consider moving averages, exponential moving averages that we expect to be hit, act as support, be back tested, etc. I took a weed edible about 20 minutes ago, so let's get the show in before 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 I start to get a little giggly. What's up, 58 of my closest friends here? Thank you guys so much for joining me. What's up, Dan Piero, Black Hammer, Chrisom Obed, Daniel Adamchuk? Thanks for hanging out with me today. Hope you guys are well. Hope you guys are safe with your families, hunkered down. Plenty of toilet paper. I went food shopping today, and you know, for more or less, everything was still there except for chicken and toilet paper. So I will work for chicken and toilet paper. And of course, tips are always appreciated, but definitely not necessary. And if you want to support this channel, definitely some affiliate links below. More than happy, more than appreciative if you guys would want to find your support there. So let's start with the daily chart. We'll go into some lower time frames, go into some higher time frames. Keep it simple. I want to start with our moving averages. Okay. Now let's talk about historically here. When our price action is below all three of our MAs on the daily, the 50, the 100, and 200. Let's talk about this. What does it look like? 6,200, our price was at, you know, 50% lower. Now our MAs around here are at 8,500. And our price action is about 50% lower. So this does quantify similarities of how bearish Bitcoin can be, how far away they can be from our moving averages, and still, you know, find that support. Now, I'm not expecting a giant bounce here. There's nothing that says Bitcoin is ready to bounce here, and a lot of that just has to do with players in the market. In bear markets, US equity bear markets, we do have face-ripping rallies through that. I remember in 2008, 2009, while we were falling, there were days where we were up, you know, 6-7% on the Dow, stuff like that. These things did happen. Right now, the correlation with Bitcoin and US equities is pretty solid. So we're seeing that happen. Now, over the weekend, it was basically setting up that the S&P and the Dow and everything were kind of open lower on Monday. So Bitcoin started to price that in. Go to a lower time frame here. Bitcoin started to price that in. Now, yesterday, this candle here, we had an announcement. Let's go to the hourly. We had this announcement from the Fed. They were going to, they lowered the Fed funds rate between 0 and 0.25%, basically back to those historic lows. And then the market rallied a little bit from 5K just to a hair under 6K, and then we gave it all back and then some. So it was very short-lived, but it was a moment where a bullish, seemingly U.S. equities event, Bitcoin rode the wave with that, and then as futures started to kind of get opened up and we saw the market gapping down again, Bitcoin basically followed suit. So Bitcoin priced in today's bearishness basically kind of before the market opened. We had a little bit of a rally through the day here. We got as low as $4,400. We got back up to about $5,200 there. But as you can see, we have come basically back and have failed to hold that 9K area there, which is sorry, that 5K area. 9K would be good, wouldn't it? That 5K area, we're just kind of hovering right under it. Now, we still, I believe, will probably consolidate in this area for quite some time. As I said, we are so far below our moving averages on our higher time frames, you know, the 4 hour, the 6 hour, that I expect some sideways price action to allow these MAs to get a little closer. The price action will test these again. What's unfortunate is that these are now resistance levels. What was support is now resistance. So another thing we want to start looking at is how can we define a bottom? How do we know what to look for when we want to see a bottom? And one of the biggest things you kind of want to look for is some side here. So let's go back to early 2019, end of 2018, early 2019 here. That's the 5-minute. Let's go to the daily. There we go. And there we go. So we were starting to see, and what we were trying to look for is some sort of a divergence here where we had a higher high with our RSI begin to form, and basically seeing the correlation that with the price action. Ideally, what we were looking for is some sort of a lower low with Bitcoin while our RSI was stabilizing. Now, our RSI on the daily at that time got as low as 9. Okay, we broke 10 on the daily RSI. So we have a historic area there where we can then use to extrapolate what are extremes in this market here. So a daily RSI of 10, okay, which didn't necessarily mark the bottom because our daily RSI at 10 was at Bitcoin 4,300 and our low was another $1,000 lower. But when our daily RSI, when our low $1,000 lower hit, our RSI was at 27. So we were putting in a higher high with the RSI and a lower low with Bitcoin's price action. Now, from a historical horizontal, if this was our low in our RSI here, and now we can see our low in our RSI here, we hit 15, okay? So what we're looking for basically going forward here is if Bitcoin starts putting in lower lows in the price action, is our RSI gonna remain higher than 15, which would be the first sign of some sort of strength in the RSI, which is yet to be shown yet in the price action. And in that could be a first sign that maybe we are beginning to stabilize in this area. Now, the Dow fell 12% today, almost 13%. And Bitcoin, more or less, and you really kind of quantify, since Bitcoin hasn't closed over the weekend, we're basically in a situation here where Bitcoin's range, it's actually been pretty tight. I mean, we were at the highs there. This is the daily. So our high daily yesterday and our low today, you know, from a volatility standpoint, it was a 25% move. Okay. But if we just take our overall, you know, candles here, we're basically still in line with US equities. And I don't see why that would change. If the Dow continues to fall, the NASDAQ, the S&P, if whatever, as the week goes on, I just can't see why Bitcoin would decouple from that correlation. And that basically means that potential for lower areas are in play. Now, we had a wonderful bottoming here back in 2018. Okay, this was a very nice pattern here of our ascending triangle. Okay, we look for those kind of classic patterns when we want to, you know, basically say, okay, what are we truly forming here? But the time this took is something we have to keep an eye on here. This kind of bottoming here, it took almost 4 months, you know, 130 days basically from our $4,300 resistance to our low at $3,100. The consolidation, lower high, higher low, lower high, higher low, and then there is our breakout. So this was a 4-month consolidation, okay, that we were experiencing here that eventually led to Bitcoin, breaking above that and putting another $9,000 on the table there of bullish price action once our neckline was broken there. Overall, our low to our high there brought Bitcoin over 300%. But in order to do that, okay, months of bottoming consolidation had to take place. Now, for all you guys that were trading Bitcoin back here in February of 2018, I do remember this capitulation move here that formed a classic V bottom. We had a very oversold condition. We had a nice bounce there. Again, from trough to peak there was a 100% move in Bitcoin's price action. But again, the overall pattern was still lower highs and then eventually lower lows did take place there. So my point through all this here is that time is what's going to bottom Bitcoin, not necessarily price. Time and confidence in the market and establishment of a pattern, we might, how many inverse head and shoulders have we been speculating on over the past several years here, or year price action here? I have no idea what that specific pattern is going to be like, but it's going to be something that with time is what's going to form there. So listen, if you're a long-term believer in Bitcoin and you believe years out from now Bitcoin will be able to hit those astronomical targets that people have been throwing out there over the years, back to 20K, 50K, 100K, etc. For that to happen, we need some sort of a bottoming pattern event, and that doesn't mean that we can we can't test lower areas. We absolutely can. Was it stamp I did it on, or was it the next stamp? Okay. So what are we talking about here? I remember when we were analyzing this price action here in 2018 and 2019 here, and we're talking about other levels, the Bitcoin 3000 level, right? That stop and reverse area. This stop and reverse area here, basically this kind of quadrant of price action, basically between 1800, right, and $3,000. So we have this quadrant, we have this quadrant. We'll ignore these lower ones for now. So when we entered this area price action back here, this was the one that actually stopped the fall. This history of August 17 through September, just 1 month of price action where Bitcoin went from 3K to 5K, had a nasty pullback back to 3K, and a very gorgeous bounce that brought us to 20K. So there was significant resistance, turn support, at Bitcoin $3,000. Bitcoin then front ran that low because remember Bitcoin did have that bottom around 3150, I believe, was the low. So by $150 or so, we actually front ran that low and accelerated higher here to our bull market of 2019. Seems very far away. So what do we have here? Well, yes, we do have our higher low. Okay, for now, we have found this support at $3,800. We had a very nice bounce. Okay, this is the kind of candle you want to see, high wave spinning top. The daily was a nice looking hammer. We have the volume we like to see. This is really good looking volume here. But as I said earlier, it's not just the volume, it's not just the price, it's the time it takes. So for now, the higher low narrative can be in place. Here are our lows back here of 2K. Here's our lows back here of the low 3Ks. And now here's our low maybe in the high 3Ks. And then we basically are able to maintain that support and then consolidate a little bit there, and then onward we can go. But as I said, time and belief. Now, we can throw a bunch of things out the window. And frankly, I'm very happy with this because I'm sick and tired of listening to it and people being able to defend it with history, because basically that's all we talked about, the logarithmic chart of support, which was a failure. I mean, we can also argue that Bitcoin being a safe haven in times of volatility is out the window as well. It's not. It's just like any other asset where if you want to be risk off, okay, Bitcoin will capitulate just like all the rest will. Okay, gold isn't safe. Silver, palladium, these were in bullish markets. They now in bearish crashes. So let's get the safe haven thing out of the window. Digital gold, let's get that out of the window. And I think a lot of people over the past few weeks of Bitcoin and the YouTubers who were posting extremely bullish content about what's going to happen there. It's unfortunate that unfortunately a lot of people took that advice, and I wouldn't say got suckered, because listen, we're all adults here, and we're all big boys and girls, and it's our responsibility as traders and investors to take responsibility for our trades. If we're going to enter a long or a short, especially a leverage one, we use stop losses to protect our capital. If we're long-term hodlers of Bitcoin and crypto, then this drop here, in theory, is another opportunity to add to your HODL position, because you're not looking about today or tomorrow or the next week. You're thinking about Bitcoin 2022, 2023, 2025, right? So we're talking about that. And then the halvening, this narrative of the halvening where as Bitcoin goes closer to the narrowing, this can be a very bullish thing, historically speaking. Once we get past the halvening, Bitcoin is in a bullish uptrend, tends to run in a bullish uptrend. These things historically do happen, but before that, Bitcoin does drop 30%, rises 30%. Okay, this is now a 50% move here, so we really can throw out those percentages out the window, except the fact that the volatility does occur towards the halving. Bitcoin miners have a shit ton of coin on them, and they're deciding themselves, do we want to capitulate our coin before the halving? Because listen, if you're a miner and you're going to get half the Bitcoin per block you mine after May 12th or whatever it is, then you're getting half the reward, but the price so far isn't reflecting the drop in inflation, where we go a little under 2%. So you're getting half the reward. It's still costing you basically the same to mine this. You got to upgrade your equipment. You're paying for your power bill to do that. So the miners are having this kind of conundrum here that, wow, are we going a lot lower? Miner capitulation is something we really haven't seen yet. Now, we did see it. We did see it back here. We saw that on some of the on-chain volume and some of the other charts that we can see that talk about miners and their capitulation. So miners did capitulate here. This was not miner capitulation here. This was more retail capitulation and shenanigans, unfortunately, happening with some of the exchanges. I don't know exactly, nor do I want to describe what happened on BitMEX, but this goes to show that this market is not liquid enough to handle major exchanges having process issues, okay, that can basically cascade through the entire market. Okay, there's not enough money in this market here to prevent something like that. If something weird happens with some of the price action at Fidelity, you don't see that take the entire market down like you kind of did with BitMEX and their forced liquidations, pulling the price action so low. Your time horizon is very important. Obviously, we like to think about this day by day. If we're doing a trade, if we're scalping, if we're doing a swing trade, we're in these things for minutes, hours, sometimes days. But overall, we want to think about what's Bitcoin going to be like in 2021 and 2022. How much of the supports? This is another thing I want to talk about. What is support? We know what resistance is, okay? Resistance is where we continue to get stopped in our price action of Bitcoin, okay? We know that resistance is at 20K, okay? We know that because that basically ended that bull run there, okay? we sure as shit know that there's resistance here under 4K, 14K, because that ended that as well. We now know that there's resistance right around 10.5, okay? There was no support apparently from 10.5 all the way down to 4K, okay? And where we did touch here was that I talked about earlier, this history, history, and history, okay? But what about all this history here? What about all this untested history? Now, we can use fractals, okay, and analyze, well, this is what happened in 2013 and 2014, the last bear market, and we can kind of get a sense of maybe what a really nasty, because this was a very nasty bear market here, 13, 14, 15, you know, basically almost the end of 2015 here until we really started to rip and basically start a nice bullish uptrend here. Are we doing a similar pattern to this, okay, that we did to this? And our lows of our previous bear market basically touched, give or take this crazy wick here, more or less the highs of the previous bear market, somewhere in this range here, right? So if we're going to do that again, okay, we had the wick here, but more or less we found stability at the highs of the April 20 at 13 bullish advance here, which was about $238, okay? So it took all this time to test the previous all-time high and then reestablish that as a new low of support that Bitcoin did then take 250 days or so until it was able to break out of that channel consolidation, right? And start our next bull run. We fast forward to today, okay? Did we do a bubble echo here? It's something similar to what happened here, where we had our capitulation. We then had a very nice bullish move, 400 and something up to 700 and something. You know, definitely not the 300% move we had, but then we fell off there and basically started putting a lower low, you know, a little consolidation here, a little false bottom, little bear, a bull trap, and then finally our bottom there. So why are I talking about this? Well, if we do something similar, then we can basically move our low target, which would be the previous all-time high of the previous bull market, which is a little over $1,000, somewhere in this range of $1,100 to $1,400-$1,500 here. And that would mean that Bitcoin, you know, has that possibility to get down here and do what it did here before it was able to do this. So now we want to do this, 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 and then we can do that. So that's one of the things that in our back of our mind we have to keep in. Now, how many times have people said on my tweets, on your tweets, when you make a bearish call, or even if you make a bullish call, and there's someone's like, oh, there's no way that could happen. There's no way it's gonna ever get that low again. There's no way it would break the this, it would cause the that. You're crazy. You're spreading FUD. You're whatever. Screw that. It's all out the window. I think today's price action, this week's price action, this month's price action has humbled all those people, okay? Nobody knows, okay? I think we can honestly say no one has a clue. People, respected people in the industry who are invited on CNBC talking about Bitcoin, saying, oh, we're basically kind of find support around 9K. We're kind of stabilize here around 8K. We're kind of never drop below 10K again. And they have no clue. Okay, it's in their advantage. It's in their interest, obviously, for a bullish Bitcoin, right? But they don't have a clue. They're just speculating. They're just hoping. Okay. They don't know. I'll admit, Bitcoin is a very special asset. We've never seen anything like it, but we have. And the reason I say that is because charts are charts. If you've ever traded OTC penny stocks, you've seen charts like this. You've seen parabolic moves right? That can come all the way back before, extending to that parabolic move once again. Now, what makes Bitcoin slightly different than an OTC stock? Obviously, the first thing is dilution. OTC stocks, they started a specific share structure. There's 100 million shares out there, and then they start to dilute. So they're putting downward pressure. They're increasing inflation, and no matter what price the stock was, by the time they dilute, the share structure is completely changed. Now it's hundreds of millions or even tens of billions. And there's no way that price action could ever get back to that point because the valuation would be insanely high. And so what do? They do a reverse split. They basically take the ratio of shares out there, raise the price, and so what was 10 to 1 or 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 or 4,000 to 1, we see that. Now Bitcoin doesn't do that. It's not about share structure. It is about amount of coin out there. Right now there's 18 million coin out there. And right now 18 million coin, okay, as our inflation rate does fall after our halving and we'll get less coin on the market, there's still plenty of coin on the market for people to buy. And we're not seeing that reflected in the price just yet. That's why it's important to keep in mind how the halving is going to affect the miners, because the miners have a lot of coin they can dump and they would put a lot of downward pressure on the market, especially combining that with the Dow and whatnot continuing to fall. Now, daily. Okay, so we have a chalk and money flow in the daily. Okay, we got it well below our zero line here. Let's make this a little fatter. Okay, so bearish, daily, bearish, 3-day. So we came back. We've now found resistance on the back test of our 3-day chalk and money flow. This is bearish. Weekly, we are below our zero line. This is bearish. Monthly, we are well below our zero line. This is bearish. On balance volume, we like to see divergences in our on balance volume. If Bitcoin price is stabilizing or even dropping, we like to see OBV rising through this right now. Now here was our low. We definitely see a lot of people decided to catch a knife here. It was a very nice pop in our OBV, put a little higher high here. We've given a lot of that pop back, and we're seeing that more or less, I believe, still in correlation with our price action. Higher time frames, same thing. We saw the dump. We saw people definitely picked up some more coin there. We're excited about being able to buy Bitcoin in the low 4Ks, and now once again we give in, a decent amount of that back. Higher time frame here, we don't even see it. Okay, we don't even see it. And what's even worse too is we basically found resistance where we found that support line here back in April of 2019. Okay, now this is Bitcoin in the low 3Ks. This is Bitcoin in at around 5,000. So we haven't tested this area yet. But once again, we're finding that resistance that used to be support. And the monthly, this is kind of scary here because you can see there was our low, there was our lower low, but we actually had a very nice bounce there. And now we're below. We're putting in a lower low from our January 1st lows of 2019. Okay, so daily, 3-day, weekly, monthly, CMF, OBV, bearish. RSI, I talked about our RSI earlier in the show, looking for a divergence, a higher high on our RSI, a lower low, or basically stabilizing in the price action is something we want to see. We talked about historically, recent history, where Bitcoin was able to get down to about 9. This isn't as vicious of the dump yet, but again, this could be the pause. This could still be the pause in the dump before, lower prices there. We can see our 3-day, okay, still holding around 26. Our weekly is at 32. Now let me go to BLX here. Okay, so we're going back to 2011. Okay, talk about historical crazy lows in our RSI. 27, 28, 33. So we know a line here, historically speaking, where Bitcoin does bounce. Okay, now remember, This wouldn't necessarily mark the bottom, but it does mark the bottom of the RSI trend. And every time the RSI did find that low there eventually, what happened? Again, this is the weekly chart. We had some sort of a V, and we're looking for that new V here, right? Is it going to be here? Are we going to get to tap these lows again? From a historical standpoint, this is the part where we have bottomed in the past, okay? And we have running room still to get there. That's my point. We have running room to get there. And in the monthly, we have running room to tap the previous area of support there. Again, there's history here on the monthly in the 43, 44 area, and we're a little bit above 45 in that realm. Daily Coinbase. Okay, Stoch RSI. Now, the Stoch RSI in bullish markets, okay, I remember the weekly here, we were up here for so long, this was months, okay. We can do the same thing on the bottom here. Here is our zero line. On the weekly, we still have lots of running room to get down to our zero line here. On the daily, we did have a little bounce off it, but we're still pretty weak. On the 3-day, we haven't touched zero yet. We do touch zero in these bearish moments here. So once again, there's still room to fall on these oscillators. Same with the weekly we talked about, and same with the monthly. There's our bear cross rejection, and we can go lower. Let me go to monthly historics here. So this is what I found this kind of interesting here. This is BLX again, monthly, stochastic. Once we get out of this area down here, right, we're in a bull trend. Okay, but you see where our Stoch still currently is. We're just about halfway down. Okay, so if our Stoch was a lot lower here, I'd actually be a lot more optimistic that we're closer potentially to that bottom area. We know we get down here, we're here for a while, right? But once we're able to break out of that, Bitcoin is off to the races here. We can't quantify how much lower this can go and how long that could potentially take. We do know though that once it gets down here, it can be here for a while, and once we break through it, okay, it can really rip. And once we're on a bullish uptrend, okay, that's when you want to be in Bitcoin again on this higher time frame, the monthly chart, and you have time. Even if you were in here, you have plenty of time to take great profits. If you were in here, you had plenty of time, you know, to take well, maybe not plenty of time, but definitely this moved pretty quickly here. So you had a warning that once we were able to get into that bullish trend, we could then really achieve some nice gains there. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about oscillators, okay, on higher time frames, okay, that are suggesting there's still running room to go down, okay, from a historical standpoint. We're putting in a lower low on our mountain on the weekly, on the monthly squeeze momentum. This is our weekly here. Here's our Bitcoin all-time high. Here's our highs here of 2019. And for now, this was as far as we were able to get. And on the weekly, I bet you next week we'll probably be in the red once again. And you can see here that the trough of the last was much more significant than the mountain. But once again, these continue to show bearish. Now, the daily, you know, once you go to like lower time frames, what do you start to look for? So we have a daily squeeze here that we have history as to how low it can go. We see where we are here. So once again, we have running room. Okay. Now these historically here, once we start to move up in an uptrend, okay, the uptrend definitely seems to basically be intact. We have a little history here where we go very low, come back, higher low, and go up. We're doing kind of the reverse here. We have our low, come up, lower low. Okay, so on the daily, we're going to start to see when do we start putting in higher lows? Not yet. Lower low, lower low, lower low, lower low. So we're not seeing that yet on that. So there's nothing bullish I can really point to on the oscillators on these higher time frames that makes me feel like Bitcoin is finding a stabilization. Okay, we can hang out here, as I said earlier, for quite a while just because of how low we are from our oscillators. Okay, yes, Bitcoin has fallen 50%. This was a massive drop. There is a point though, okay, where people will start to buy Bitcoin and say, you know, screw it, I'm going to hold no matter what. I'm going to hold if it goes lower, you know. I'm going to hold its, I'm going to buy more if it goes lower. I'm not going to, you know, shoot my entire, you know, wad here. Unfortunately, what this bearish move also did is it wrecked a lot of people. I really feel bad for those people that got wrecked in this. Either they had too much money or they had a lot of money, I shouldn't say, in altcoins. They had a lot of money in Bitcoin, whether it was just spot money or whether they were leveraged on exchanges, um, riding coins that were, you know, people pumping Ethereum over 300, over 400, you know, Litecoin back to 100, Bitcoin back to 20K once we were over 10K. A lot of hard-earned money was basically invested in crypto. And as we can see, we're down 50% from that. So it's unfortunate because most often than not, these people will not be coming back into the crypto community. You know, they're basically saying, screw it, F it, I'm done. This has wrecked me long enough. And I think that it probably goes for the overall stock market as well. But the point in this is that this takes a lot of um, people out of this market, and we don't want that. We want people coming into the market, okay, not leaving the market because they're wrecked, because they feel like it's just, you know, one big old Ponzi, okay. There are technicals that we can still talk about, though. My last show, I talked a little bit about. I got to go to stamp for that for this here. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit about Fibonacci's and how the retracement here basically blows out all the fib supports from our lows of 2019. But what we can, you know, do is talk about other fibs from much farther back, you know, starting back. What about the lows of, you know, 2014 here to where we are now? Now, the 786, okay, has been used multiple times in lower time frame and all time frames basically to establish areas of support and resistance. As you can see, obviously not to the penny, but we are still holding the 786 area of support at $4,300. Below that, the 84 would be at $3,200 and would actually constitute a double bottom. I'm using this starting at the lows of our 2015 bear market here. Now, if we think about this, you know, from that context there, we can say, okay, well, that's something we can kind of hold on to. We've retraced, you know, 78% from our previous low to our previous high, pulled back on that, and it's in log scale there, so we still obviously have a huge gap there. But the sense that we can use the fib supports on this move here, on this nearer term, relatively speaking, price action is kind of out the window at this point. We can talk about being oversold and overbought on higher time frames here. And that's why I wanted to bring up a chart, and I did tweet this. And got a lot of response from it. That's right, I can't use the Bollingers on log as it looks all funky. See? That's why I'll use them on linear. The lower Bollinger has never been touched on the monthly chart. You know, there was starting in history, okay? But as you can see here, we did ride it slightly once the middle Bollinger, okay, was breached. Okay, resistance, resistance, resistance. Once Bitcoin re-achieved middle Bollinger on the monthly chart support, the bull market was in full swing. So where are we today? Well, we have middle Bollinger resistance. Middle Bollinger is at, okay, around $7,000. Okay, our lower Bollinger today is at around $2,200. Now, the recent volatility is once again widening our Bollingers. And in the coming months, you're eventually going to see our upper BB curve lower finally, our middle BB curve lower, and then our lower BB slow its lowering curve and eventually come up. Because our range, assumingly, will still be in this range here. This is incredibly wide still. Our Bollingers are incredibly wide. This is like a great white shark just still opened up, okay? Because we're still you know, this parabolic move, we are still unwinding from it. We are still unwinding from it. If you can believe it, something that happened 3 years ago. But it's true, you know. And if you think about it from, you know, the ascending and the descending, this triangle of confluence is kind of still in play. Let's look at it from just a pennant more than a descending triangle here. Okay, so we basically began to break out here once we were able to break through all-time highs around $1,200-$1,300. Here's our Bitcoin 20K. We came, let's tighten this up there. Actually, we gotta do, actually almost can't really do it. Like the wick kind of broke it, right? Because if we go wick to like fully, not bottom, not top, we can actually see we kind of poked below it, if you will, and we're just above it right now. So, you know, can Bitcoin kind of do something like this and then come back up here, get rejected once again, 8K, 7K, kind of depending on when it happens, then come back down once again? You know, is that the future? I have no doubt we'll be able to test higher areas in the future. Okay, the question is, can we then break through them? As I talked about earlier in the show, we know what our resistances are. We don't know what our supports are. At least we don't know how strong these supports are. If nothing from 10K to 5K, okay, which seemed like strong support. How many times did we see talk about, you know, key support, $8,500? Once we can regain support above $8,500 here, we can be very bullish. You know, key support that turned out to be just meaningless. Okay, there was no key support. There's nothing about 8K down to 5K, right? That is meaningful support. What we do know with the most recent price action is that closing above $6,000 would be notable, would be bullish. Okay, and that's something that we can think about as to what would be some of the things we want to look for as to what could tell us we've turned the corner. But for now, 6K is basically our line in the sand where we're not going to cross here. And thusly, a tap below 4K, okay, is also a line in the sand that if we begin to break below it, okay, if we come back to testing it closer, okay, this could be two things here. We could establish a double bottom, okay, and then we can bounce off that. Or if we fail to hold it, it can then become that new resistance. If the markets, the equity markets continue to fall, the Dow goes in the teens, right? The NASDAQ continues to fall. I can't believe the NASDAQ fell so much here. But we also have to keep in mind how high a lot of, how inflated, how bubblicious our markets were. Okay, this is the Dow here. You can see where we are today. We have broken through our Christmas lows of 2018. Okay, that was a nice V bottom recovery here. So we talk about, you know, what really is strong support. Well, we can't fall below this because we had such a nice bounce from it. Well, we blew right through it. Now the Dow is kind of hovering around this January of 2017 price levels just above $20,000. There's still a potential of a lot of running room here because we don't know the extent of COVID and the virus. We don't know. We know we're shutting down America. We know we're shutting down the country. Okay, we really haven't done this. This is like a blizzard. You know, if you're in the Northeast or whatever, the North, and you get blizzards that are over a foot, 2 feet, the town shuts down, things shut down, you hunker down, you go food shopping, you load it up. We're seeing this across the country here, unprecedentedly. So we don't know what kind of impact this will have on the economy. We are definitely going to be in a classical recession, which will be 2 quarters in a row of negative GDP. We're not going to see it when the Q1 numbers come in, because we're still in Q1 for another 15 days. And then Q2 starts April 1st. So April, May, June, we're going to see a tremendous fall off in economic activity. And then after that, we don't know how long the summer will play out here and what kind of situation we'll see if we've turned the corner on cases and what we don't know. We just don't know. So because of that all uncertainty, the floor for the Dow and for the U.S. equities, who's to really say what is, other than areas where we've had major consolidation in the past. The way this translates to Bitcoin is if we get the Dow floating in the teens here, I don't see how Bitcoin remains above 4K. If it does, if it actually shows strength relative to those markets there, that would be a very bullish sign. Bitcoin could still trickle down a little more, but you could start to see it slow. And that is something that we could keep an eye on and look for that kind of bullish divergence that we're just not seeing quite yet. CME, I talk about gaps in the price. Okay. I did update this. Oh, God damn, I didn't save. So that gap's filled. That gap's filled. This gap is up here now at 91 something. There is definitely the gap up here, guys, at 11.7. And then there's the gap right here. Right there at 36-ish or so. Let's get really accurate. Also, keep in mind that CME is not spot price. It will front run by sometimes hundreds of dollars the price of Bitcoin. See it? There's the gap. Price closed, actually closed down here, open right here, there's a gap right here. Later on, we had this wick coming down, tried to fill that gap. Actually, it's right here. Yeah, there's the gap, 35.70. And it couldn't. And this gap remained. Now you're saying, well, Chonis, this happened, a year ago. Why does it make a difference? Why does this gap on the 4-hour chart, okay, why is that of interest to me? Well, the reason it's the 4-hour chart is because of this gap. There was a gap way back here, January of 18, at $13,800. And I was looking at it all through this market here, 2018. I'm like, oh, there's no way this will fill. Bitcoin's down 5K. The gap's up here at 14K. Bitcoin is never going back to 14K anytime soon. And sure enough, filling this gap marked the top. Okay. And until that day, and once that happened, I was a believer. I said, okay, the 4-hour chart is my go-to for gap to be filled. So just as I feel there's a gap down here, and there's a gap at 9K and gap 11K, yes, bullishly speaking, I do believe Bitcoin CME gap at 11K and at 9K at some point in the future will be filled. So yes, at some point in the future, I do believe Bitcoin will be back to these prices. But I also believe the gap down here at 3570-ish area will also be filled. And as you can see, we are not that far from it as we speak. So I'm more assuming that we will fill this first. Now also, we were up here and we were thinking that 11K wasn't that far off as well, but that didn't happen there. So these gaps fill. They can take a while. This gap here took over 500 days, okay? A year and a half, so gaps do fill, but they can take a year and a half to do so, or more. Or more. All right, guys. Wow, 80 of my closest friends, only 33 thumbs up. I do appreciate the thumbs up. Definitely hit that thumbs up button. Give me a follow here on YouTube, Chonis Trading. Give me a follow as well on Twitter What's up, Pat Can? What's up, AD? Yeah, I mean, listen, we can catch knives, okay, if we have a time horizon that says, listen, I don't know where Bitcoin is going to be tomorrow or the next day, okay, but I'm thinking about what's Bitcoin going to be like in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now, even with this pullback, even with this pullback, even with this pullback. Okay, Bitcoin was hundreds of dollars. Well, first it was dollars, then it was hundreds of dollars, then it was the low thousands. Okay, and now it's still the low to mid-ish thousands. Okay, overall, yes, we are still holding somewhat of a higher low, even though our wicks from a standpoint like this of just a straight line have violated that. We can still maintain that. There's nothing that says Bitcoin can't go lower. You can say, I think the bottom is. People on Twitter, for God's sakes, are saying, oh, I think the bottom is in. Well, they probably bought Bitcoin, and more power to them. I hope they're right. But no one knows. Okay, no one knows. So if you have money that you can afford to invest, if you want to say, listen, I don't know, I don't care, but I'm gonna just put a few $100s in, put a few thousand if you have it, and say, listen, Bitcoin here at 5K, I can't believe it's so low because it was just back up here. Okay, but the point is that Bitcoin continues to follow these equity markets, and because of that, that's where the sense of how much lower we can go is still that possibility. In terms of altcoins, okay, altcoins, I mean, in a bull market, we definitely saw altcoins, many of them outpace from a percentage standpoint Bitcoin. So yes, long-term opportunities are there, but how many of these projects, which are, let's face it, people, a lot of these projects are meaningless. They're fake. They're phony. They don't mean anything. They're gonna go to zero. By zero, I mean they're gonna be eventually delisted. Their network's gonna be shut down, and it's gonna be over. So I can't tell you the next 10 bagger, 100 bag coin. Okay, if Bitcoin gets bullish again, I'm sure we'll see bullish divergence in altcoins like we normally do. You get a higher risk, you get a higher reward. Okay, but I can't tell you that one altcoin is going to do better than other ones. We saw tremendous falls in ones that have been very good over the past year, Litecoin, Ethereum, Link, etc. Okay, but there's nothing that really says, from a collaboration standpoint with big companies or whatever, that any of these are really going to survive the test of time. And that's the point. If you look back in years past about the top 10 coins, every few years there's coins you never heard of that just get dropped off and coins that come back on. So there's nothing that says this coin is a better this. I don't want to hear, have you read their white paper? I don't want to hear they have a partnership with so and so. The price is the price, the chart is the chart, and Bitcoin will still decide if we're going to be in a bullish market or a bearish market. Total crypto right now, we're about $136 billion. In the grand scheme of things, that's still pennies compared to the gold market, of course, the equities markets. So we're not that much of a mature market yet. Now we do see that we did find that support even lower, basically down here once again. Maintaining 100 billion would definitely be something important. We got as low as 91 billion in the market here, but because there's so little money, relatively speaking, okay, there sometimes might not be enough money to there might not be a bid. That's what we're seeing now in treasuries. There might not just be a bid to absorb the cascade of selling if that panic kind of ensues. But there'll be a point where buyers will outpace sellers, where the market will just decide, yeah, I think this is low enough or is a good value. When Bitcoin was at 10K and people were thinking, oh, I wish I had bought it at 4K or at 6K. Well, now we're at 5K. So if you were bullish at 9K, I can sell you Bitcoin 40 cents, 40% off. You know, the question is, if you had a little money and you could buy Bitcoin, or you say you would buy it at no matter what prices, there's a point where a lot of money will come back into Bitcoin because they can't believe it's that low. And their time horizon is that much where they can basically say, I don't care about the short term, only going for the long term. But until we get more stabilizing in the overall equity markets, it's hard to basically quantify that this is a bullish pattern playing out, a bullish support area playing out. As I said earlier, I do expect consolidation just because of how low we are from our EMAs and our MAs. Our oversold conditions, do tend to basically even out. As we can see in the equity markets, they're leading. Bitcoin is not leading right now. Bitcoin is following. And from historical areas here, we are outside the 3-day Bollinger. We're outside the weekly Bollinger. Okay, so. Let's look at middle finger here. Okay, so we're technically seeing what we would consider oversold conditions. Only problem is our Bollingers are still on the weekly here very wide. Okay, so this will take time for these to consolidate lower. When the weekly Bollingers tighten, that is when we get a more meaningful move of directional change. This was our bearish move here. We tightened up here. It took weeks. And then this was our bullish move here. We're still extremely wide here. So any kind of a trend directional change will still take time for us to concern. And that's the thing that I will continue to look at. I want to leave you with this. We only have one life, okay? We can think about priorities differently in times of great stress. We are in a time of great stress. We are looking for leadership, and sometimes we're not really seeing it. So you're seeing this almost people freaking out and are looking for a steady hand in these. I hope I can be that steady hand for you in crypto and basically just share my thoughts without the pump and the pomp and the circumstance. Nothing would make me more happy than to see a bullish Bitcoin and a thriving crypto market. But I'm not prepared to say we're there. I do believe in the notion of Bitcoin over the long term, and definitely these events can show Bitcoin can have that unique use case that Satoshi did truly envision, that not controlled by banks, inflation rate under control. You can basically hold your own capital. It's transferable very cheaply. These are things that Bitcoin still offers with its promise, but it's still young. It's still only a teenager at best. It still hasn't had its bar mitzvah yet. So we definitely have time to see what happens. And yes, Jay Constant, Bitcoin never does what I want either, but it does what it does because it is itself, because it's never ending. There's no close to the market. It will always play out. So while crazy stuff can happen while you're sleeping across the world, people are very actively trading it. I wonder what happened when Asia woke up last Friday and saw what happened in the price action of Bitcoin. So because it's never ending, we are it is constantly being affected by world events. Okay, it's not just a U.S. thing. Things that happen in China and across the world have impact on Bitcoin, and that's the thing. It's a global currency. That's the promise of it. No borders, no restrictions, no CEO. It is a communal thing that is decentralized, and that's the hope. That's the promise. The price action is the price action, but as long as things keep working in the system, as long as transactions, and as long as these projects in the future to make Bitcoin more easily to transact with, will be very helpful to allowing it to stabilize and be there as a great resource for the future. So with that, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me about an hour or so. Be safe, hang out there. I know you guys going a little stir crazy, as am I, but hopefully we'll see brighter times not too far ahead. So until next time, which will probably be sooner than later, this is Big Chonis. Thanks for hanging out. Talk to you soon. Peace.